Let's pray. Shepherding God, we thank you for guiding us together this day and for all the ways that you guide us through life. We ask that you send your spirit of inspiration, encouragement, and wonder into this time. Open us up as we seek information, as we seek deeper knowledge of your love. We ask this in all things in the strong name of Christ, whose arms were open to embrace all who sought him. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Now, what I will do is I will mute everyone. So all of you panelist folk, when you go to talk, just unmute yourself, okay? And go ahead. You still have to unmute yourself though, Sue.
I did send the panelists a little bit of history of what we have done here in Chris Panzers United. We've been 3 years of the process, have done a number of things already towards under the banner of Affirm United, of what they expect. Just as a reminder for people at QUC, some of the things that Affirm United sort of mandate for us to become affirming is to do a vision inclusion statement, which we now have on our website, an inclusive marriage policy, which we have done just as of the last month, education sessions, services, looking at our language. Every committee that we have at QUC has updated their policies to include an inclusion statement. And we did have MB Abilities Foundation do a needs safety assessment, and we did make some modest changes, praying that we may be able to do an elevator one day, but that's a big ask. We've been learning a bit about our unconscious biases, but we felt that the reason why we needed to do this today is that there's always more to learn, and COVID kind of numbed our memories for a year. We sort of had a hiatus. So these are the questions that we thought would be interesting to ask churches that are already affirming. And so I'll read them just for the benefit of QUC, and then we'll, panelists, you can ask, you don't have to answer every question. You can jump to it. I will move you on through the questions so we get through time. So these are the questions that we will be asking today. What was the most valuable part of the process for your congregation? How has your congregation changed since becoming affirming? Has there been a difference in worship style or language? If you had the opportunity to start the process all over again, what would you do differently or recommend others do? How does your congregation continue education? What impact has this process had on your congregation and your community? So I'll start with question number one. Just jump in, panelists. And as I said, we won't have any questions until at the end. What was the most valuable part of the process for your congregation? You can unmute yourself, panelists.
You want me to give it a shot?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Maggie. For when I recollect our process, one of the most valuable aspects of it was when we went church to church and did these like exercises. There was one in particular that jumped out of to me when I read the question. We did this exercise where we voluntold people to come up and join a circle. And we had one person identify as being different in some way. We didn't necessarily tie it to any particular category. And we had that person stand outside the circle. And through story, we got people to pivot or shift. I don't know if you remember this, Betty, but we got them to shift and realize that if all you have to do is pivot or just shift a little bit with no discomfort to you, and someone can be invited in. But even better is if you pivot your thinking and take a step back, then that person doesn't have to come to you. You have gone to that person. So by taking that step back to the person who is outside the circle, they're no longer outside the circle, and they are no longer left excluded. And so that was one of the messages through these skits. And like I say, we didn't ask for volunteers. I went around and grabbed people and said, get up there. And we tried to get like a range of generations. And it was that sort of progression of very visible exercises that I think were what I remember as being very positive impact. What about you, Betty? Do you have anything you want to add to our Two Rivers? You got to unmute yourself, Betty.
There we go. We didn't do the exercise that you're talking about at Somerville, but as far as Somerville congregation, we'd had a vote previously, which was a big no, and then down the road, then we had this last vote. But I think with Somerville, it was the guest speakers that we had. We had a lady, two ladies and two gentlemen, and they spoke about their work and spoke about what it was like to be gay. And I think that was a big turning point for Somerville because they understood more. And most of them didn't have a lot of knowledge. So the first time it was just a big no, but with the guest speakers and everybody talking about it, it made the big difference for Somerville Church.
Who else would like to jump in? What's the most valuable part of the process?
I will, Sue. I think every time I think about the question, I probably would answer it differently because there's so many learnings that happen throughout the process. But I would agree that storytelling, I think, is a big part, is a valuable part. And for me, what I liked the best was the celebration after the vote, and then you have the official congregational celebration. That was a terrific day.
If I could just follow up, I still carry that with me, that experience of the celebration. But Deb and I worked on this together, and I think what at the start, people kept asking, why do we have to do this? We already are welcoming. And we had already, brought in an inclusive marriage policy and had a history, and people were a little bit afraid that it would cause division within the congregation. And just to go to Betty's point, we brought in a guest speaker who basically laid out what the reality is for one part of our community for kids in high school. And it just, people had no idea. And I still have people who come up to me and say, I just really didn't understand that was still going on. And so that, when people saw the reality and they understood, this is real, it changed the way people felt about it.
I would echo that same thing, that our biggest, most people in the committee said that education was the biggest part, and awareness of how difficult other people's worlds are, and that there are people in your congregation that are dealing with some of these issues that you maybe aren't aware of. And when it's brought to light, you might have a better understanding of what they're going through and how to deal with it. And you can be more supportive of people. And the other thing is you get to, when these people come in, whoever you invite in to talk to your congregation with their very heartfelt stories, you get to know something more about them, especially the LGBTQ IA plus community, and you're moved by their experiences, and you can change the way you think. It's a process for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so our next question is, how's your congregation changed since becoming affirming? And I guess what we'd like to know is, have you had more people come to your congregations, or have people felt comfortable perhaps coming out of their closets? Or has there been marriages of people, that of same gender, or different genders? Has there been baptisms of perhaps lesbian or gay couples? So has there been any sort of visual changes that you would say, oh yeah, we've done that now?
Well, I would say yes, we have done all of those. There was a great story of two gay men who had their daughter baptized. Unfortunately, it was during the pandemic, and at that point we were not attending. And they wished that the service would be private, but they had found out about Wilmot. I think a lot of people see our rainbow outside the wayside pulpit, and that creates some interest. Anyways, they had contacted our ministers, and one of them was from Colombia, and the other one, I just can't remember. Do you remember, Maureen? Anyways, another country, and they had their baby by surrogate. And one of the dads had not been baptized himself, so he was baptized, and their daughter was baptized, and so that was pretty neat. Just in the last week or so, Maureen and I were asked to contact a young woman. She's 18. She's looking for a safe place to worship. She didn't feel comfortable in her congregation and wasn't sure whether how she would fit with Wilmot. So we reached out, and I chatted with her and said would certainly be welcome to introduce her to some people and make her feel welcome. And I asked her what brought her to Wilmot, and she said just seeing that rainbow outside the church. But I wouldn't say there's been like a drastic change in the congregation, or the walls didn't fall down, or the roof didn't cave in, or we've always seen ourselves as being inclusive and welcoming, but we're just trying to be more intentional about it, I would say.
For our little church, which is mostly elderly, we don't have very many young people, but I had a foster baby from 4 days old to 7.5 months, and he was adopted by 2 women. This is their 3rd adoption. They have 3 boys now. And when we had the adoption, it was I had him baptized under me. The foster department gave permission to have him baptized, and we did it in the cemetery, and everybody from the church turned out. And even people that knew him just through me turned out. We had a big crowd, but their parents are now looking at attending Westfield. It's closer to where they live.
Nice.
And yeah, so they've been there Good Friday, and they've been there Easter Sunday. So they will be looking at attending there, and they felt welcome. Their church, they didn't feel welcome in. They didn't feel welcome at all in their church. And they went to a couple of churches, and they said, well, they didn't think the congregations would accept them. So they have chosen to stick with Westfield because it's closer than Somerville. So, but, and they felt welcome when they come those 2 Sundays. They felt really, like, for strangers, they felt really welcome. The grandparents came too, and everybody felt welcome, so.
I'll just tag on to that and say to your list there, Sue, all of the above, I believe, have happened. I do the most profound impact for me as someone watching, going through this, was we had a senior person, not a senior as an age, but a senior person as a prominent, very active at the church, come out during one of our services. And the support, he had a round of applause, and the love there was amazing. So when you say if there's been a church, I feel like at Westfield, we've become more of that flexible heart as opposed to a rigid rule. And that has allowed us to sort of open our arms. And I know that the flag out front has drawn people in, that it is a very public, intentional Pi Day kind of thing that has
Yeah.
brought people in. And I think that's something we just need to keep encouraging. So.
Cool.
To add on for Somerville, Somerville are much, I find much more welcoming. They've always been welcoming, but I find them much happier, much more contented. And if somebody new comes in, they don't seem, now it's just, oh, how you doing? So like Maggie says, the church has become much more loving and compassionate and understanding.
Excellent.
I
Difference,
just-
has there been a difference in worship style or language? That's the next
I
question.
just want to pop in before that, Sue. I saw that Maureen had been trying to pop in like 2 or 3
Yes.
times. So
Okay, sure.
I
Unmute
just-
yourself. Yeah.
I was just going to add to how it makes a difference in that we can now speak with a mandate of being affirming. And so things like advocating an Anglophone school district and West, for a policy on sexual orientation and gender identity, things like that, that we don't have to go to a vote. We're not speaking as individuals. We can actually speak on behalf of the church as part of what that vote meant for us.
Wow, it's powerful.
Go ahead, Claire. I saw you trying to jump in too.
I just wanted to say we have done the same, had marriages happen, and we also take part in the Pride Parade every year in Moncton, and we have the Pride service at our church it's yearly as well. So those are some things that we have done that has really enriched, our congregation.
Excellent. So any difference in worship style, would you say, like in the last few years, or language? Like example, changes in the Lord's Prayer, identifying mother, father, parent. I know that, having looked at many services online, a lot of the prayers that we take for granted and use, can be adapted. Have you done any of those sort of changes? Or United Church does a pretty good job of looking at language, but.
So our Reverend is Reverend Kate, and Betty can correct me here. She has dabbled with she's sort of trying new things, I would say. So our parent, our mother and father, things like that. She's definitely giving things a try, and I don't hear any backlash or any issues with it. We have lots of our Christ light is actually pride colors. And so that has actually something that stayed. We didn't know that it would be something that would transcend time, that we would keep it that way, but it stayed that way. So that's a positive in my mind. Betty, did I miss anything about that? No.
Yes, we were there for your celebration. We remember that, Christ light.
And interestingly, I don't know if you remember this, but we were getting ready for the picture, and we were doing our celebration. And then there was this woman who didn't get up because she had mobility issues, and we're all like getting ready for the picture. And she said, "Oh, don't worry about me. Don't worry about me." And a couple of people said, "That's not very inclusive." Right? So we get her, we help her. So inclusivity, it ranges everybody. And that was a really nice memory that I took away from that was, you're right, reset. Inclusivity means everyone.
Anyone else want to add anything to question number 3?
Yeah, I'll just jump in for just a second. Words do matter a lot. And if you use them and change them to, you know, the times that we're in now, it does affect people in a very positive way. And we, you know, in your prayers and your hymns and your readings, it has to be inclusive everywhere. And some of the other things we've done, I know maybe you've looked at some of this stuff, but the size of print in your bulletins, if you're doing a printed bulletin, if you're doing a screen, the contrast between the wording so people can see what it is that you're telling them. Your sound system has to be good so that people with hearing deficiencies can hear what you're telling them. And we've used cordless mics that, so somebody who has mobility issues, they can take part in the service with a cordless mic. And just your responsive readings, avoid the use of the word men and women, and use, you know, the left side of the congregation or the right side. That's just an easy way of doing it. And we've had a good response with the Zoom as well. We've brought in some people from, you know, all over Canada and in US, and somebody from Germany even, that would not be able to even attend if we were just in person. So Zoom is here to stay, you know, for everybody, but just be inclusive as you can with your wording.
Excellent. Anyone else to add to that one? Or shall I move on?
No, I think that's good. I just would echo a lot of what was said. We're doing much the same at Wilmot. In terms of language for prayers, God is often referred to as mother, but not exclusively mother. And we have large print bulletins, sound system, all those things like Claire says are important. We have a Christ candle and a rainbow candle that's lit at the beginning of every worship service. So those are some changes, but much is the same as what others are saying.
Excellent. Okay. If you had the opportunity to start all over again, would you do anything differently or recommend that others do things differently? I mean, particularly now we're in strange times, but I find the technology really offers us incredible gifts of sharing through videos and through live presentations like this Zoom. What would you do differently if you started all over again?
I would just say, like, when we started, we had a mandate from council to affirm diversity in all its dimensions at Wilmot United Church. And so we ran around and talked to every group, which was a good thing, and got input on what people were concerned about. But we really had to understand that we could do only one thing at a time. I think I would have wished that we'd come to that understanding a little bit earlier, and then we could move on to other themes. But that's what it took to go through one theme for us.
This is Maggie. I personally, in reflecting on the questions, I was hyper prepared to advocate, listen, talk to my father's generation of people, thinking that it'll be difficult to change minds. And I didn't get that at all. I was like, live and let live. Life is, if you find someone to love, go forth and be great. And I feel like I may have overdone it with the youth on my side, because they grew up in a different environment where they were just like, well, yeah, why would you exclude anybody? Why would you do that? You're mean. Like, and they just rolled with it. Like it was a non-issue fairly quickly. And where I personally felt that I, as a participant of this group, fell short was in my own generation. So middle-aged folks, I was very surprised to hear people worried about what this meant. Well, are we going to be vandalized if we put a flag out there? Are people going to, leave us and so forth? And I had a really good conversation with one person who was worried about vandalism. And we grew up in a situation where people were trying to come out. So my father's generation, you didn't come out. Boom, you just didn't do it. If you did, there would be severe consequences, so forth. He lives in very rural Quebec. And, but my generation, if you came out, there was bullying, there was violence, there was bad things. And so that stuck in the generation of those who are, like I say, middle-aged like me. But we got there, and we did do a paced approach. And that's just my reflection going back. I wish I had planned more for those who were born in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. But that was just my reflection.
We did lose some people. We lost some people at both Longreach and Somerville, but they were older people that were really stuck in their ways. But as far as anybody else, everybody else was fine. Like Maggie said, it was the older generation that thought that would be the ones fighting and arguing about it, but it wasn't. And so we did quite well at Somerville for this, but there's nothing I think we would have done differently.
I would say the same thing. There's a lot that you learn as you go along, and you just have to remember that not everybody is on the same page and they're going at their own pace, and you have to proceed with caution and make sure everybody feels like they are belonging to this whole process, and be sensitive to how everybody's learning. And it does help when you bring in speakers with lived experience. It makes it more real for people who are listening. And yeah. And make sure you're hitting all of the aspects that affirming is part of. All the different ageism, race, mobility, indigenous issues, LGBTQ, all of those things. Make sure you're hitting on all of that.
Anything else with that question?
I would say, judging by what you've shown us, Sue, of the work that QuizFam has done, it looks like you've done a lot of good work already. So good on you.
As the Australians would say. Good on you, mate. Thank you, Debbie. Okay, so how does your congregation, this is an ongoing process. We know it doesn't stop with that celebration because we are lifelong learners, particularly in our United Church, that reminds us of social justice every week. I love that about our uniting church. How do you continue congregation education in your congregation?
We're trying something a little different. We had two separate committees, an Affirming Diversity Committee and a Hospitality Committee. So we're trying on a 2-year trial basis to join those two committees and call ourselves Radical Hospitality, to look at how we can continue our welcome, but maybe outside our doors, and be more, like I've talked about, be more intentional and more inclusive. So we've just begun that. We've only met maybe a couple times this winter. So we'll see where that goes, but we're just trying to broaden it a little bit. Because as Maureen said, our mandate from council was to affirm diversity in all of its dimensions. So we're going to do some work around that. How do we continue to grow?
Good.
There are a couple things that come to mind when I think of ongoing education, because it really is, as you say, a process leading up to the celebration, but then that same process keeps going. So guest speakers have been valuable. We had a fella and his family who were from Libya, and they're Muslim, and he came in and he talked about how Christianity and Islam are friends and how there's a common ground between the two. So that was a very powerful discussion. And just recently, we did a Pi Day video where our Reverend Kate hosted, and we had, I think there were 5 speakers. Betty, you can tell me if I got this wrong, but there were 2 of us who were families who we said, the question was, why is affirming important? And we talked about how this is how we want to raise our children. This is what it means to be a parent in the current environment, and what it means to make our children feel like they belong. Then we had a person who has been out for a long time, but was still feeling like he struggled with talking about it too much. So I don't know what happened in his background, but he was brave enough to share a bit of his story and talk about what it feels like to be excluded. And then another speaker was, as I mentioned earlier, one of our members of our congregation who came out at the age of 50, and he came out to his parents and his church fairly early. So that was Pi Day, this last one, and I would say it was very powerful. I don't know, Betty, if you got to see it or what your thoughts were on it, but I'll pass the baton to Betty.
Yes, I watched it, and it was powerful. It was powerful, and the speakers were excellent. So, and the service that Reverend Kate did was excellent. She did an extraordinary job at it. Would you say, Maggie, at the service? So.
Can you recommend any speakers? Just maybe email me so I can take it back to our committee, so that we can look.
We can certainly try, and we'll certainly share.
Have you had any youth share from the pulpit?
About this issue? Not us.
No, it's not easy to get. Yeah.
No. I'd be interested in if someone had. I do know that our at least one member of our youth has come out as bisexual, and one member of our youth has come out as, or is working through transgender. So there's a safe space for them there, and continuing love for our youth in that regard. But from the pulpit, I don't know. I don't think so. Betty can correct me. I do know that we had a university couple come in, and they were amazing. They were, one partner was bisexual and the other was transgender. So they were working through all that together as a couple, but they were university age, not. Yeah. Betty, did you have anything?
How about the others?
One of our probably most powerful presentations was from a high school teacher who leads a GSA at Ormocto High School. So that might be something too you could look at to see if your local high schools have a GSA, and maybe a youth or a leader from that group might be interested in coming to talk to you. It was very, very powerful presentation. Probably one that, like Maureen said, people said, why are we doing this? We have always been welcoming. But when they heard her speak about some of the experiences these kids face, like not going to the bathroom all day long because they're afraid to. So when they heard things like that, it was, that's what these people are living with, kind of. So yeah, it was very, very powerful presentation. So it's good to hear from the youth if we can.
So for those that don't know, GSA is Gay Straight Alliance in the school system. I'm not sure what it is in the French I should know the bilingual, but I don't. But I know it exists. Having researched it recently, I know it exists in both. So, yeah. Anyone else like to add to that?
We've had within the last, well, I guess it was last year that we had speaker speak on conversion therapy that he personally was had to go through, and it was unbelievable. And then we just recently, for our 5th anniversary, had a speaker talking about racism. He was Black, and what he's experienced himself, and they're very powerful. All of these speakers that we've brought in have been, it's just unreal what some people have already lived, and they're not old people,
Yeah.
But I'll just quickly say some of the things that we have done this is about continuing education, right? Question number 5.
Yep.
Yeah. We also do Minute for Affirm topics, maybe once a month. And that's part of the committee's responsibility to find a topic. And oftentimes, like throughout the year, there's the International Day of Memory of the Victims of the Holocaust. There's Black History Month. There's Indigenous Peoples Day, Orange Shirt Day, which is for the residential schools, and Transgender Day of Remembrance is in November. So there's all kinds of food there to work with that goes in your mandate for Affirm. And we have also done movie nights. It was usually, we were trying to do once a month, and all of those topics were affirming topics that we would cover. And they were great. It was really awesome. The information you get from both of those things. And then we do the celebration of our Affirm. It's been 5 years, and we celebrate Pi Day with events. And we also try and keep the library stocked with appropriate books that people from the congregation can get their hands on. If they don't know about a certain topic, maybe they want to read more, or it might have to do with progressive theology, that kind of thing. However, wherever you're leading to. And education events. There's all kinds of stuff through the Fundy St. Lawrence Dawning Waters, other things that you're maybe can come from your minister. And we also have attended River of Pride meetings and attended other events outdoors that would be standing in solidarity with people that have an issue that, aligns with the Affirm. And then we also have an association with Katimavik, which is students that from across Canada that have different areas in Canada and that they go to, and they do work in the community. And they also have attended our church, and some of them are Indigenous, so we get their perspective as well. And some of them are gay, and it's just another way that you can relate to the greater community. Yeah.
Excellent.
So just, I mentioned that, I found it helpful to focus on one thing and then move on to the next. So the second theme we went after on our committee was mental health. And that gets really big real fast. And so we were able to, at least we had someone participating on the conference back in the days when we had conferences, committee on that. And we decided to just, in our own, what we could do at our level and make the best use of the people that we had on our committee, was to have a workshop inviting all the committee members, especially to look at what are the barriers to people participating around, I forget now what some of the questions were, but things that people might feel concerned about, or why they wouldn't come to church, fears they might have, or what they thought was helpful. And that was, so we had about 20 people showed up for that workshop, facilitated in subgroups. So Deb could say more about it. feels like a long time ago now, but, and then things kind of, I think we felt the committees would probably try and carry it forward. And so I think there's still some pieces there, but we did try to move along on that. I know Deb took one of the steps with there was an offshoot of that, but I don't know if I'm going to say something about that or not, Deb.
Good. Okay, I think in light of time, we'll keep moving on. So if you were birds looking from another tree, looking down, looking at your own churches, would you, in the community, do you think the community have noticed that you've become affirming, and what impact do you think it's had on your community and your congregation? But I'm kind of interested in the community question. You've spoken a little bit about that today, but impact.
Maybe I'll jump in. Sorry. That's my role. I start, and everybody else finishes. So I think the impact has been profound, in my humble opinion, as I speak with youth and seniors and everyone across all interests. We're in Grand Bay Westfield, very small community. Betty's also in a small community, but on the Kingston Peninsula. And I think the flag has been a topic of conversation because it got people talking. And I just want to reiterate on a comment I made before, there was no violence, there was no vandalism. It was the opposite. Us being out there with the flag has been embraced by everyone I've spoken to. Maybe I'm speaking to select people, but the people I'm engaging with are supportive. And in a way, it's bringing our community better together because we're talking. So then, of course, the pride colors on the crosswalk, that happened. And so we're sort of building these things together in a very small community. And I like to think that Westfield was a bit of a starter of all those things, those positive things. And the other thing I know is whenever someone moves to town, because I know some people, when they move to town, I say, you gotta go to Westfield United. We love everybody all the time. And it is really nice to be able to say that. And one of the ways I say, there's the proof. That flag out front is part of our proof, part of our story. So come on down. I'm not as usually as talk showish about it, but I'm like, come, bring your kids. Your kids will be loved. Your kids will be, all of you will be loved. It's an open, accepting place. And like I say, I'd like to think that it sparked a little bit of more good things and bringing out the good things in our community. So that's my 2 cents. Betty, what do you think? I keep deferring to Betty.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think in the small community of Somerville, I know we have one little store and they were discussing it and they thought it was great. And these were older people, said, it was great to see that flag on the church. And, so, and we are welcoming. We've had people trying out churches that come in, and I'm an elder and Sue's an elder, and we would go up to them and introduce them to people. And they stayed, and they said, we just couldn't believe how well you welcomed us, how loved we felt. You felt like you've known us all our life, and they've stayed and they've been great workers in the church. But as far as a lot of people know, because this is a Catholic community that I'm surrounded by. So it's, but those 2 people came and saw and stayed. And and I agree with everything Maggie says. The flag has made the big difference. It's posted on theirs is on the sign. We have ours on the church. So
I think I can't speak for Kate, but I know from having been part of the process with Elizabeth fairly closely. In fact, we were, but I know the phone calls from the community increased to Elizabeth, and counseling with people that weren't necessarily comfortable coming to church, but parents of children that just wanted to talk to, someone, clergy. I know, that was one of the things she said, was that there was a lot more exposure, and she found herself counseling and talking more with people in the community about it, including people on the town council. And so it did have I know from what Elizabeth said, the community impact it had. So I can only imagine since then. How about the others?
I would say echo the same thing, that people are more aware of your community and your relationship to your community if you are at all proactive and in action with other communities in your community. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we have attracted new people, and now we've lost some, yes, but mainly there's always work to be done. There's always, because we're changing, the community has changing needs all the time, and you have to keep up with it and keep working and keep learning. And there's always something new to learn. So I think it's been a great thing to have done.
Good. Yeah.
In terms of
Anything else?
I just would say, in terms of impact on the congregation, whenever we have any kind of a meeting where we're doing any visioning or planning, and people are asked, what do you like about Wilmot? What is it about Wilmot that brings you here? Invariably, it's either outreach programming, because we are a downtown church. Peter Short will say we're halfway between the community kitchen and the legislature. So there we are, parked right in between those two dynamics. So if it's not outreach, then it's the fact that we're affirming. So it's meaningful for the people in the congregation. It becomes our identity. And when we had our celebration, we got a letter from the mayor of Fredericton congratulating us about being a welcoming presence in the downtown.
Yeah, we should be looking at that. Right.
He's never come through the doors, but he sent us a letter.
Something. Well, anyone else have anything to say? Because I think we need to open it up to questions. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add? There might be some things to come up in questions. Reverend Richard, can I turn over to you to ask some of the questions that you've been sent today?
Sure. We've got about 6, so I don't know how much time we have, but I will go in the order that I received them, as is most fair. One of the first questions is an easy one. How long has each of your churches been affirming? Years, months, 5 years?
Central 5, right?
It must be 3 at least for
Wilmot,
Westfield.
5?
Wilmot 5.
Has it already been 5 years for Wilmot? Wow, time flies. 5, okay.
Betty, what was yours?
5 was what Betty put up.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep.
You can all unmute and leave yourself
Yes,
unmuted
yes,
if it's
yes.
easier.
5 seems to be a pretty round number. Okay, so another question that was asked was, how did you know when it was the right time to take it to the congregation for a vote?
Mm.
I don't think we did know. It was sort of a,
Yeah.
you just have to have faith.
Trust in the spirit, I get it.
You just have to jump in and hope for the best. Did you on Somerville, Betty? Did you feel like you guys knew, or just
We're
jumped
like
in?
you, so Al, it's time to vote. We've done everything. Let's see what the people say.
Yep.
We were
pretty
so
much-
nervous, I'll tell you, but it
Yeah.
was 100%.
Pretty much the same with us. We had done the required work and had many meetings, and conversations, and it was time to see what the will of the people was.
Okay. So this one came a little later on, but it's tied to that question. How concerned were your churches around how many members you might lose if the vote went against affirming?
Ooh.
Like you talked a little bit about how the congregation responded when, I'm going to leave if it's affirming, but what about the number of people who would leave if it was against affirming? Did anybody ever talk about that?
We did.
Yeah.
Among our committee, and our committee started with 5 people, and people moved or did other things, and I think there was certainly a sense of it's time, we've waited long enough, there's always an excuse not to do this, and by the same token there was concern about, well, why do we have to do it, aren't we already welcome? And so that was it became I know I certainly lost sleep over not people. I was more worried about the impact on our church if we took the vote, we went down this process, we took the vote and we lost, and how everyone would feel, the damage it would do to how our congregation would feel about what we had done together. And
right.
But we have pretty, people are pretty remarkable, right? That was just me worried about that. But I felt there was more at play than people coming or going. I felt it was more about how we would feel as a congregation and how we would handle a negative outcome.
Okay.
I don't think I've admitted that to anybody, actually.
No, very real concern, it's part of the conversation. So just continuing in that vein, so when the vote went for the affirmative to be affirming, did those who left your community, did they go and find other church families? Have you it's been 5 years for some of you. Have you reached out to some of those people that have left? So that's 2-parter.
Yeah, I would have to defer to Reverend Kate. I wouldn't be able to answer that.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Anybody else have any insight on families that have left maybe to other churches, and if you've reached out, Claire?
It's hard to know the full reason why some people may choose to leave. It could be progressive theology that they're not in tune with. It could just be that they're not ready to do that. And most of them, anyone that I know has found another church home and they're happy there. But we have gained new people as well.
Yeah.
So it's a fluid thing, and people have to make up their own mind. But when we first started this, we started thinking about it in 2008. I think it was quite a while. And then the timing wasn't right. We knew it wasn't right. So, and then other things came up, and we didn't pursue it again until 2013 and into 2014. And then we aggressively did the affirming thing. And we knew just by talking to people, and we had done enough education. If you do it right, you do the right amount of education, and you bring people along as gently as you can, and you will have a successful vote if you have done your homework right. So I think once you're on the journey and you're fully in it and you've got a good committee that's really behind it, you will be a successful.
Okay, thank you. So there was some conversation, Maggie, I know you mentioned it, about fear of violence, vandalism, division, and all that stuff. Thank goodness that didn't happen in your situation. Yeah. But how in the moment did you address, or others, did you address that possible potential, the fear of, well, if we put the flag up, we're going to get vandalized? How did you address that in the moment, because we're going to have the same sort of questions?
Yeah, so she came around, but what I said was, well, if we don't, then our loved ones get vandalized. Because our loved ones will be hurt if we allow that sort of behavior or thought to overcome our open mind, or our open minds and our open hearts. So that was how I put it. And we both had kids, right? So I said, what if someone hurt my kid? Because he he felt like he was hurt because people wouldn't include him. I would take a busted sign over hurting the feelings of people I love any day. Signs can be fixed.
Yep.
And we have a security camera, I think. Or we could buy one, you know?
There you go.
But I was like, what is it? Harm to people or harm to things? What's our value system? And it worked with this particular person.
Okay. Any other perspectives on that? I mean, it's a pretty hard one to beat, changing your value system from significance of building to significance of neighbor, which is kind of what we're called to do. But anyway,
Yeah.
others, how did you address that fear? Or did it not come up?
I think you have to take a stand. You have to, we're the ones that people are looking at for guidance, and I agree with Maggie wholeheartedly. You have to stand up and put your self behind what you believe and what you want to change in society. And we did have some protesters outside one Sunday. This was quite a long time ago. We haven't had anything happen since. And we just stayed inside and waited for them to disperse, and there was no violence, there was nothing. They just wanted their moment in the sun to protest. But really there has been virtually no violence. No, it was very peaceful, and, you know, so I wouldn't worry too much about that.
I can appreciate that. It's not so much allaying fears that this definitely won't happen, but we're standing up for something, and if it happens, we're ready for it. That's a good way to come at it. Okay, here's one more question. You can remember, for some of you being 5 years ago, what was the initial drive to begin the affirming process? If you remember.
I think our Reverend was driving it initially, Reverend Elizabeth. But I can't, Betty, do you recall what was the initial push here?
No, not really. I agree with you. I think it was Reverend Elizabeth thought it was time, you know,
Yeah.
to see what we could do about this, you know, and form a committee. So.
Yeah.
All right. Ooh, puppy. So that's all the questions that I have. That's all that came through the chat. So I don't know if you want to open it up to see if anybody else has any other questions or how much time we have left. I don't want to.
Yep. We're just on time. Panelists, can you give us a few more minutes of your time? Do you feel like anyone need to leave? No. I would like just to mention Betty and Maggie, because you came in late yesterday. We have recorded this, and so I just wanted to check whether that's okay with you, that it goes onto our YouTube site for Quispamsis United for education for our congregation that went here. Is that okay? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So Reverend Richard, maybe get us back into gallery view so that we can, our panelists can see the faces of our wonderful congregation. I'm going to do that. Does anyone have anything specific? I mean, how in the chat box now you can say thank you or whatever you want to say in the chat box to our panelists. But if there's anything you want to say, go for it.
I'm just going to add one thing. I swear I'm going to stop. I swear. Okay, this is it. Reverend Elizabeth retired, and we had started this process before she retired. And we had to we did go through the process of finding a new minister. And I think the fact that we were in an affirming church was a draw for Reverend Kate. I think this was a draw to her as someone who was in ministry looking for her first home. And she came to us. I believe that us being affirming was part of her decision-making process. bonus.
Anyone else like to add anything, or?
If you put your hand up, I'll look for you.
Oh, Barb.
Bob, yep.
Yep, this is Barb. I just wanted to say that you answered so many questions in my mind as to how the congregation receives this and the aftermath of becoming affirming or not becoming affirming. And I so appreciate having those questions voiced and answered by such a willing panel. Thank you very much. Very, very helpful.
I think it gives us hope that our congregation will look at this, hopefully, as your congregations did, and are willing to open it up to everyone.
And your word intentional is such a perfect word that yes, you know, our congregation is relatively inclusive and welcoming, but it needs to be more in my opinion, being more intentional or more visible would be so helpful.
Yeah.
I like that word. Thank you.
Cindy, do you want to unmute yourself, my friend? Cindy's on our committee.
Yes, hi, thank you. And as a member of the committee, I would like to offer a sincere thank you to the panelists for their honesty and their time today to provide us with some answers to some questions, which I think everyone probably had rolling around in their heads. And I'd also like to thank the QUC members that were generous enough to give us their time this afternoon to be part of this education process. And I think this served as a very valuable education session, and one that we were very fortunate to be able to take part in because we got firsthand information and feedback and thoughts from people who have been through this. And as it is an ongoing journey, they're still on that path. So thank you to all of you who came to share your wisdom with us. And thank you to the members from QUC who took your time to join us in this educational opportunity. Thank you.
I think we might leave it there because Cindy, those words were perfect. And again, just our sincere thanks, and thank you all for coming today, and get out into your gardens or some fresh air. And I'd like to close with prayer just before we leave. Loving God, God of extravagant love and inclusive love, we praise you and we thank you that every one of us has been welcomed and accepted by you. We pray that you'd open our hearts and our eyes and our ears to do the same for everyone we meet, in our workplaces, in our families, in our communities. Thank you for your ability to change us and transform us so that we have the assurance that we will not be the same this time next year, through your love and through your amazing grace. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks,
So thank
Sue.
you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Bye now.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Sue.
Bye.
Pleasure. Good.
See you guys.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay.
Get back to your guitar so we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm going out. Bye.